is willed in my heart, conceived in my soul to rebel. Oppression is hell, a mirage created by the rival of God. A part of me's harmony, but my heart's in the street. The whole world's now scarred by the mark of the beast. Before light is dark and darkness is peace. Blackness is the seed of heaven, the essential color to be in touch with, fall in love with. Dear people of the globe, I hope that you in good health by the time my voice hits you. I'm hoping all is well with you. My mission is to build with you, touch upon some real issues. Senators, government officials, sit at the conference and listen. Have a Coke or mineral water and say I'm reminiscent of George L. Jackson, Malcolm X's last win when I'm rapping. Americans, Africans, Asians, Russians, and Arab men. Send your clergymen to journey with Nostradamus through the projects. I promise an unforgettable experience. Compare me with Imhotep, get in more depth. History was stolen, get in my zone. What makes the powers that be less gangster than Al Capone? The Rosetta Stone was stolen like Chicago was. Think I'm a thug? Let's talk about some conquerors. Napoleon, Sun Tzu, Genghis Khan, Hitler, Edie Amin, I'm Attila the Hun. Let's bring it back to the cat that invented the gun. From the Indians all the way to the Pentagon, I'm sitting on Capitol Hill. I'm composing this rhyme, guaranteed to make all of y'all feel the beauty that was trapped under siege. Believe in yourself, you'll be free. Take it from me. Blackness is the seed of heaven, is willed in my heart, conceived in my soul to rebel. Oppression is hell, a mirage created by the rival of God. A part of me's harmony, but my heart's in the street. The whole world's now scarred by the mark of the beast. Before light is dark and darkness is peace. Blackness is the seed of heaven, the essential color to be in touch with, fall in love. The rejection of what's right can mean you're in denial. It either breaks you or makes you become hostile. I swallow many lies before tasting the truth.
There's one person on earth that is the African person, and traveling around the globe, this African finds him and herself in different climates. And because of the nature of the production of vitamin D in the body, it has to begin to regulate itself. So in order to produce vitamin D, this very dark complexion, very curly-haired African begins to depigment itself. And over thousands of years, this very dark complexion, wide-nosed, thick-lipped, very curly-haired African, because of climate, depigments itself. Its hair gets straight because of the oils produced with the lack of the sun. Its nose gets aquiline, the lips get thin. And over time, this African depigments itself into the European. What also helped this African get in very serious trouble was the Wormian Ice Age, which was the last ice age on Earth. This Wormian Ice Age literally chased them into the mountains of northern Europe that we know of today. That would have been where Cheikh Anta Diop says the 51st parallel is. At that point in time, for thousands of years, in the depigmentation process, ice mountains were created. Ice mountains that did not allow Africans to return back into the southern lands. Therefore, they had to retreat into caves and put clothes on. When what is known as an interstadial came, which is a warming trend of the Ice Age, they then found the ability to begin to move further south. As they moved further south on the other side of the ice mountain, where it had been a temperate or a very warm climate, when they got down into the real southern lands here, coming out the Caucasus Mountains, they met upon peoples of different backgrounds. The great majority of them of African descent. Whether you are in Mesopotamia over here, whether you're dealing with any of the Saudi Arabian areas, this is why it's so important to understand that the European, the Eurasian as we know them today, the essence that made Saddam Hussein light complexion was called the Jectanide. Jectanides. That is the formation of the Eurasian coming down, meeting these individuals in Mesopotamia, and getting a first concept of what culture and civilization is. They still couldn't get it too good because they started wars, because this was their manner. They were a very violent people. They were a very dominating people. And so they were kicked out of every town they went to as they were traveling west, and finally they find themselves in Cana, and then they cross over, which then brings this Eurasian into Kemet, and for the first time you see Eurasians in Kemet. This did not happen during the Old Kingdom. This did not happen. This happened during the first intermediate period. The Africans had gone through 6 dynasties prior to the first European of any substance coming into the land to make him or herself feel known. So all this concept about the pyramids, all that's nonsense. And I think that really, as our brother was saying, it's true, we got to stop talking on certain levels. I believe that our discussion at this point is counterproductive. See, we're not about asking them, was Egyptians black? That's yesterday's discussion. See, we dealt with that yesterday. Whether or not you're up to the par is your business. Okay, you missed a train. I didn't. I was on that train. And so now we have got to be about the formation of a nation in terms of our thought process. And this is why the Moors become so very important to us, because if you do not understand the Moors, it's very difficult for us as a people to understand why we're in the position that we're in today. You cannot understand why we're in the position we're in today if you don't understand what happened in 1492. You cannot understand what happened in 1492 if you don't understand the Crusades. You cannot understand the Crusades if you don't understand the Moors. Because the very nature of the knowledge that the Crusaders, the Christian Europeans, got of the riches of the East, why Columbus was on the seas in the first place hundreds of years later, was because of what the Moors had brought into Spain. And when you look at European powers, see, here's another way that you can look into it. See, this is why the two areas that they want to keep black folk out of in education is social studies and language arts. It's the two areas that we have to conquer. Math, science, all that's important, but those are all physical sciences that we can master anyway. But you see, social studies tells you what happened. Language arts puts it in a language that tells you what happened. And see, we're not suffering from a misunderstanding of science nor of math. We are suffering from a misunderstanding of ourselves and how to express ourselves, which falls into the category of social studies and language arts. So when I was looking for an area to find myself in Board of Ed, I immediately went to social studies because I understood that revolutionary things could happen, and they are happening. Because you got to understand the sequence of events in history. You have to see the sequence, and when you see sequence, then everything else comes to be an understanding. The Jectonites coming down into this area then mix with these African folk, and these are the people who would later become the Saddam Husseins, but deeply entrenched in an African thought. See, even Saddam Hussein is an African man, even if not by complexion, which he is by complexion. But even if they were to claim that because of their complexion, they still lived a culture that was African-based, because they as a people had no culture. They brought no culture with them. They brought no formed pattern of behavior, because it was so easy to adapt to the behavior of African people, because that's where the culture was. That's where the civilization was. That's where measurement occurred. And where measurement occurred comes mathematics and science and the formations of technology, and that's what brings the civilization through. So it's important that we understand these things in terms of understanding who we are as a people today. For instance, we teach that the Western civilization is based on the Aristotelian model. Aristotle's model of so-called democracy and all this other stuff that they taught, this is what the Western world is based on. But what they don't tell you is that it was the Moors that translated the works of the Greeks, who then taught the European Aristotle. See, we don't know that. We think that Europeans sat and studied Aristotle. They didn't. They couldn't read. The time of Moorish Spain, 99% of Europe was illiterate. Kings and queens could not read and write. They were living in barns. You see all these castles that they say these kings, those were castles built by Moors that when Europeans moved out and moved further south upon attack by Christians, they took over those. They didn't build those castles and all that other stuff. Moat with alligators. Ain't no alligators in Europe. So how are you even going to put alligators in the moat if you don't have the animal in your backyard in the first place? You see, whenever you see lions, you know you're dealing with Africa, even in The Wizard of Oz. When you hear people saying they threw people to the lions, you know you're dealing with an African concept, if not at least the lions. Because there are no lions anyplace in the world but in Africa. And as you go through Meta Nature, you will see the same thing, okay? As we begin to develop these thoughts, I think that we'll be able to move out. Now, let me ask, because I see some hands just shot up. Will we accept questions? Because normally I just open it up for a discussion. Okay, so we'll go straight, and then I'll give chance for everyone to have their say. Believe me, don't believe a word I say. Not a word. You see, I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to present information, and that's very important. Because too many of us, as we come before you, we get insulted if you don't accept it. See, I don't have no problem because I've done the research. And I know that once you challenge what we say, which I love, I'm going to challenge you to read up on it. And because I know and I'm confident that you're going to come up with the same concepts that I've come up with. We're living an illusion out here. We really are living an illusion. We are living a magician's world, like the Wiz, you know. And people have presented a world to us, and like Wade Noble says, power is the ability to define someone's reality and have them accept that reality. And we are a people who for years, people have been defining who we are, and we've been accepting it. Once you tell somebody, no, I don't think that's who I am, they've lost all power over you. Whether you realize or not, and it doesn't make a difference if you're a homeless person in Newark or if you're an IBM executive. Once you say that you don't have the power to define who I am, you've taken all power. Now, they can imprison you. They can physically do things to you, but they have no power over you. Because if you're not afraid of death, then you are the most powerful person around. Because the lack of the fear of death, and I'm not saying not to have a fear of death, because I fear death. I fear things. But I don't ask you measure me by the amount of my fear. Judge me by the amount of my courage. Because it's courage that then negates fear. So I'm a human being. In fact, I worry about people who say that they're not afraid of anything. In fact, I try to stay away from people who say they're not afraid because they put themselves into situations where they really don't care what the outcome is. See, I care about what the outcome is. And I want to teach our children to care about what the outcome is. You see, I'm not a kamikaze. And I'm not a martyr. I want to live. I want to live a long life. As Dr. King said, longevity has its place. You see? I'd like to see my children to be 30 years old. But at the same time, if at that cost it costs me my pride and dignity, you can forget that. You can take this, because I'm going to take at least 6 with me. This is the kind of mentality that we have to face for our future. Because that militia is doing a lot more than what we see in Texas. Believe me that. And let me tell you something else. I'm for gun control. Control your gun. You see, I'm not going to tell our community to sell our guns back when I know that they are collecting guns by the dozens every day. You got to be out of your mind and tell the young people get rid of your guns. You see, because I'm not buying back nothing. Ain't nothing in Toys R Us worth with gun. You see what I'm saying? I'm for gun control. In fact, the Constitution almost demands that you bear arms. Okay? So we got to be careful what we tell our children. I'm for gun control. Control your gun. The Moors, as we see them developing and as we look at their development across the world, what we have to do is we have to break it up into certain areas. When we look at this and we understand who the peoples were in terms of who the Moors were, what we begin to do is just look at the word Moor, because they will try to tell you a lot of things about the word Moor. They are now even trying, I've heard them say actually, and in books, I'm talking about books that we give our children, that the peoples of North Africa were dark complexion Caucasian. No, I'm telling you, I saw it this year. I could give you the company's name. I've seen this. And they got it all up in this, and they got maps on it where they break up the people, and they have peoples up in here that they would even dare say that they were Vandals. And historically speaking, the Vandals and the Visigoths came down in here, but they never were in control of North Africa at the time that they're saying, and they're not in control of North Africa now. But you see, again, if we're not writing the books, then we can't say, it's like that Paul Revere's horse. Paul Revere's horse was having a discussion with the other horses in the stable. And Paul Revere's horse said, if I had written that story, I'd have been the hero because I'm the one that carried him through the town in the first place. So Paul Revere is not, but it's according to who writes the story. The horse was the hero in that story, but Paul Revere got the credit. And the same is true in terms of our history. It's all according to who's writing the books, and this is why they are doing so many different things to the history books and what they're doing to Molefi Asante and what they're doing to our brother Dr. Ivan Van Sertima and to all of the others in the attacks, because they understand what the Melanic figure is. And I'm telling you now that if this community, if our community and if our children could get a sense of who they were, our children could do in the classroom what Tiger Woods is going to do on the golf course. Now, putting aside all of the brother's personal feelings and beliefs and all the rest of that, and looking at him as a golfer, you can't get better. Not only can't you get better, but he is going to find new and inventive ways of playing golf that has never been seen before. Just as we did in basketball, just as we did in baseball, just as we do in every sport, just as we're doing what our brother John Singleton is doing in the arts, and what our brother Spike Lee is doing and our sisters are doing, Terry McMillan and all the others. They're bringing things to another level. I've seen Spike Lee do things to that camera, use it in a way that I've never seen people use it before. And I'm saying that we're going to bring things to everything we touch is the same thing that the Moors did. But you have to understand what the Moors did to understand exactly the role that they played in history. Because some of us have Moorish blood in us. And because we cannot place it right, we do not put it all together again. It was Napoleon himself who commented that Africa begins at the Pyrenees. Now the Pyrenees is the mountain range that is somewhere between Spain and Portugal. Now Napoleon III, on his inspection of that area, said Because, you know, when the show came out, Hunchback of Notre Dame, I kept telling, you know, I really didn't want to take them. I really didn't want to take my family to see it, but I understand pressure, you see, and I bend and I twist, but I wasn't going to let it go. So I kept saying before the movie and even during the movie, I kept saying, I want you to look and I want you to figure out, why is Esmeralda so dark? That's all I kept saying. Why is Esmeralda so dark? Because I wanted my young ones to go into the movie house understanding that there was something they were looking for. They were looking to find out why Esmeralda was so dark. Why was Esmeralda so mistreated, she and her people, in that area of Europe where they were living, in the Hunchback of Notre Dame, the way in which the people treated these so-called gypsies? You see? Now this is what Malcolm was talking about when he was talking about language. See, language is very important, because to understand who the gypsies were, all you have to do is one very important thing, but if you don't do it, you're going to miss it. But if you do it, it's the whole thing. All you got to do is put an E before gypsies. And then you understand who the gypsies were, and you'll understand why Esmeralda was so dark, because they were the Moors. They were the Egyptians. They were the Moors who had been in Europe, and who, after being chased out, became despised because of what they contributed to the community. That is why you'll notice that the gypsies were always reading palms. They were much into astronomy. They were very much into spirituality. They were much into the structure of the society. Why? Because they brought forward this wisdom and knowledge from Africa into Europe. And one of the first things that the European males wanted to do when they wanted to take over the civilization, the Visigoths and the Vandals, was they had to break the power of the woman. This is why it's important to understand that the concept of burning women at the stake didn't happen in Salem, Massachusetts. In fact, that's why Europeans were kicked out of Europe in the first place, because the people were saying, you know, you can't go around burning your woman just because she had an orgasm. Yeah, I mean, that happens sometimes, you know. If you just happen to last long enough, that can happen. But this is what they were doing. If anything occurred out of the ordinary, they would... Homosexuals, we have the term we call faggot. Now, where did the word faggot come from? Faggot came from the fact that in Europe, when someone was of homosexual or gay preference, what the community did is that they made them go out and collect their own sticks that they would burn them at the stake for. And little sticks, twigs, are called faggots. So as they would send these individuals of homosexual or gay or lesbian background out to collect sticks, instead of just saying collect the faggots, they started calling them the faggots. And that's where the word came from. See, we have to understand language. If you don't understand language, you're going to miss things. Because we are living an illusion here. And that is because we've allowed people to define us. And we've accepted their definition. Part of the reason why we have many people celebrating Mother's Day today is because they have accepted a definition. Why? Because Europeans don't treat their mothers right. Therefore, they got to have a day where they say, okay, we're not going to whip you today, Ma. That's how we're going to celebrate Mother's Day. We're not going to whip you. We as an African people, we have sat at the feet of our mothers all our lives. Look at our music. Today, Kiss alone has nothing but music that we played dedicated to our mothers. Tell me how many songs they have dedicated to their mothers. Think about it. How many songs Europeans have dedicated to their mothers? They may have some, but they don't have, like, they can't play the whole radio day with them like they can do in Kiss FM. But that is because we are a people who have always understood what honor is. Honor is an everyday thing. And the festivity of what we have... See, we never celebrated individuals, which is Western civilization bound. They celebrate individuals. Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas Day is Christ, and Easter is Christ. We celebrated events, such as harvests, such as days of our ancestors. But we never celebrated people days the way they celebrate this. Why? Because it's all commercial. Making all this money today, like the brother was breaking down. All these flowers, all these other things that they're going to be going out here, trying to convince your mother that you love her so tomorrow you can go out and you're not going to speak to her now for another week or two. See, it's not the way. In fact, most of the time, a lot of African folk, we all live together anyway. So we don't have to travel from another town and to see our mother, because mother is with us, or at least somewhere within us. These are the kind of concept that the Moors just did not bring. This is a European concept. And what we've got to begin to do is look at the realities of what we're facing. The origins of the word Moor. Just let me give you some examples of the word Moor. There was a brother, or gentleman, by the name of Richard Hakluyt. He was a traveler in the 1400s, who he reported that in the old times, the people of Africa were called Ethiops or Moors or Morens. which means that the word Moor was used for anybody of dark complexion. Like Ethiop means land of burnt faces. Moors meant black. In Spanish, mora is blackberry. Moreno is dark complexion. Moreno also means sweetheart. Mira, morena. You know, when you say morena in Spanish, sometimes that means sweetheart. Sometimes you say even negrita, that's sweetheart. Why? Because the African woman was the sweetheart of the nation. That is the woman who was held up, just like we hold up the European woman, the blonde, the skinny, all that stuff that we say is the model. In Africa, it was the African woman who was that model of what all perfection was. In French, mourcade means dark skin. Morillon means black grape. In Italian, mora means Negro or Moorish female. Mora also means blackberry, which when you go to Spanish, mora means blackberry. And then you have moraiola, M-O-R-A-I-O-L-A, which means a black olive. So you have the derivation of the word Moor, so they can't get out of the concept of what the word meant. The word means black. You cannot put other people's faces up here, you know, and say that they were light complexion Ethiopians. Ethiopian mean black face. So if you say light complexion Ethiopian, you're talking about a light complexion burnt face. But you see, when you're speaking English, English says that you can say what you want to because you control people's minds. So if you say it, it is. Like amen. Amen. We say amen means so be it. Amen does not mean so be it. Amen could never mean so be it in the Latin language. Amen means hidden waters that the Kemites gave to the Christian church, that in Latin, they just said amen means so be it. So be it is a sentence. If you turn that around, so be it, you say it be so. It being the object or the subject, be is the verb, and so is the adverb. Nowhere in the Latin language do you have the derivation of amen. But you do have it in Kemet. So the language, obviously, I mean, they take words and say, this is what it means, and then it's accepted under those conditions. Every day the Webster's Dictionary is being expanded. Every day is being expanded. It's just adding new words. Oh, that sounds good. Put it in there. And people who make these decisions, if they say ain't is good English, ain't becomes good English. Why? They said is, not is. Who said is, so is? They said it. And because they said it, and because they have control over people's minds, it be so. But it don't have to be so. And once you say it's not so, it is not so. And that's power. And that's where we are in need of, is just defining ourselves as a people. We want to look at the early Moors. The early Moors, of course, again looking at Cheikh Anta Diop's model, we know that if in life originating in this area of the world, Africans moved along the Happy Valley or the Nile Valley, going north, and they branched over going west. So as they traveled north, certain branches of African folk coming through the Happy Valley also branch off west. This is in Cheikh Anta Diop's work, Black Africa. Just as they traveled north, they also traveled south and created the kingdoms of South Africa. The Monomotapa, that would later become Monomotapa, and the other civilizations of South Africa. They then would also island hop into Australia and New Zealand. Okay, Zena, I'm sorry to say this, but Zena is not a New Zealand. She's a European. Yeah, and it's very important. New Zealand is an African island. Tasmania is an African island. Australia is an African island. All of these areas are African islands, but when they've been around long enough, they can tell you and make you believe that they've been around a long time. Just like when you look at North Africa, I've seen a program where the woman of light complexion was talking about the builders of the pyramids probably looked like her. I can tell you biologically why they couldn't have looked like her. Because when you dress a certain way, and in all of the friezes that we see people that are lightly dressed. If you are a light complexion and you stand in 110 degrees in the shade, you're going to get skin cancer. So you could not have been looking like that and been out in the sun without anything on. So you can't look like that because you would have died. Simple scientific principle. It had no emotion in this at all. I'm not wishing no harm on you. I'm just saying, let's look at this. Biologically, you cannot last in the sun for thousands of years and build pyramids. You can't do that. You die on top of the pyramid. It can't be done. You know? Say, yeah, exactly. You see, these are principles of science that once we get these down and it becomes grounded, then we sit and we start laughing at them. And if there's one thing Europeans don't like to be laughed at. They don't mind you laughing with them as long as they're telling the joke. as long as they're not the joke. But I have to tell you, they are the joke. They're a very sad joke, because by now I'd be embarrassed to keep telling the same stories that they're telling and actually believe it. You know, my mother used to say, you know, you're telling this story so convincingly, I could almost believe you know what you're talking about. This is how I feel about them. They play a good game. But as Dr. Clark informed Mary Lefkowitz on the tape that you've seen, you can only have a debate when there are two opinions. There are not two opinions here. There's only one, and the other is a fear of what that opinion really is. You see? So there's no argument here. But we as an African people have to ground ourselves in this and understand where the argument is and where it is not. My mama used to say, don't sweat the small change. And right now they are small change. Because even if they gave us everything we asked for, are we as a nation ready to do what we have to do in terms of assuming control? We need to understand nation building, and looking at the Moors helps us understand this. And this is why I'm looking at the Moors, and that's why I've gone from the Kemetic origin of the universe to the Dogon philosophy to the Moors. Because there's been a natural transgression in my studies to bring me to this level to be able to talk to you about all of the formation, because I can take you right back to the Kemites utilizing the Moors. So it's important that we see this connection. It's important to understand that these early African people can be broken up into different nations. But all people are one people. Don't lose sight of that. There's only one people on this planet. And because of climate, we differentiate ourselves phenotypically or morphologically. That's what happens to the human family. It's the same thing when you take an animal. You can take an animal in one condition, take him to another condition, and that animal, if it survives in its environment, will mutate itself according to its climate. If we teach this to our children in evolution classes in 6th grade, we have books that teach what's called mutation. Mutation says that if you have a faded plant, that's called an albino plant. If you have a peacock without its colors, that's an albino peacock. If you have a cockroach, a white cockroach, that's an albino cockroach. But see, they stop there. They only deal with animals and plants because they know if they took it to the human level, they would have to make the mutation a European. So they stop in the plants and animals. Because they understand in continuing the story of organic life, that which mutated itself from the human being became the European. And just like all other things, we are not the endangered species, by the way. We are endangered because humans are hunting us. The European is endangered because the sun is hunting them. And it's important to understand that by the year 3000, now I'm being nice because I'm a cosmic being. And I know I'm going to be around in another 1,000 years. I may not look like this, but I'm going to come back in another 1,000 years. So I know I'm here. And as an African being, you will never die. Not only will you never die, but you've been not only here a couple of times, but you've touched other galaxies a couple of times also. And as African people, when we were aware of ourselves and what we were able to do through our melanic state, we knew what galaxies we could tap into. It is my belief, and I'm going to end up with this as we go through this presentation, I believe that there were Africans who dared to go where no others went before. I believe Africans left this planet in ships and have been going through all the galaxies, and I'm going to explain that to you when we break down types of civilizations and how you draw your energy source and how we as an African people, like the brother said, we can get all this information we want to, get all culturally beside ourselves. But if we don't have the power to do something economically, and after you get the economics together, because remember, we had the culture and we had the economics. We got to get the military piece together. You see, because you may have all the money you want, all the culture you want, but if they got the big guns, you know, it's like when you on that boat, you know. And that man on the end is very haughty and proud. He says, I got the lifeboat. But that old dingy man on the end says, I got the gun, give up that boat. You see, it don't make a difference what you have. If someone can take it from you, then you might as well not have it. So as a nation, we have to start thinking of very serious things that make people very nervous. But we have to do it in a way that I'm not going to whisper it anymore. I really don't think there's a need to whisper. And I think that when we whisper, we're telling our children that either we're scared to speak out. Now, I understand there are times we have to speak to our family members alone. I have no problem with that. But I think we're whispering too much. And I think we're giving the children an impression that we're scared. And you know, we were the warriors of the world at one time, until the gun came along. You know, the gun is a coward's instrument, by the way, even though we invented that too. Because a gun says that I can't tangle with you human to human because you'll hurt me. So I need to be able to stand back from you and fire something at you to knock you down before you can get to me, because I'm afraid for my life in your presence. So that then when you take this gun and then you multiply it so that you shoot more than one bullet, that tells me that not only am I afraid of you shooting once, I'm afraid I'm not going to kill you, I want to get you a couple times. So then comes the machine gun. Then comes the formation of being able to stand on one continent and press a button to send a missile over to another continent. Not only do I not want to have to see you when I kill you, I don't want to be on the same continent when I kill you. So all of this war power, all of these guns are their own demise. Because what African folk are going to do is going to find a new way to create war power using what is out here now. But if we don't get into the state of nation building, then we're going to miss the whole point. So we've got to understand who we are and what we have done in situations that we have been. And Moors were pretty much in the same situation except for a few differences that we are in today. There was a group of African folk in this area known as the Garamantes. The Garamantes were the Africans from whence Hannibal came out of. Hannibal was a descendant of the Garamantes. St. Augustine was a descendant of the Garamantes. The Moors were descendants of the Garamantes. The Garamantes basically are African folk having moved out into this area because of climate, developed a culture and a way of living. And these were known as the Garamantes. And this is where, these are the Africans that would later become the Moors, move up into Morocco and Mauritania, and then move up into Al-Andalus. Al-Andalus, as you look at the word Al, if you look at it, basically has the formation of introducing it's almost, from what I can understand, it is like in the Islamic language, it's like a prefix, meaning something, what was going to follow would be spiritual, like Al-Islam, Al-Kameh. See, there is a spiritual formation using the word Al, which of course our word is all. Al-Anda. Anda means to walk in Spanish. Luz. Someone want to help me? Light. So Al-Andalus means to walk in the spiritual light. And that's what they named this country, or this that we today call Spain and Portugal. But it was more than just that, because it touched in the southern parts of France. So the Garamantes were the North Africans, and they were contemporaries of the Kemites. In other words, when the Kemites had their wonderful civilizations, the Garamantes were also doing things. See, we're caught up in Egypt where we look at the pyramids and we look at, but we don't know that at the same time Egypt was flourishing, so was Sudan and Ethiopia. So was northern parts of Africa, including Western Africa. But you see, Egypt is the doorway to African wisdom by the European. They entered Africa through Europe. That's the only thing they know. So therefore, to them, when they write books, everything deals with Egypt. But as an African people, there were things going on in Africa that's just as dynamic. I'll give you another example in social studies. We teach our children about Native Americans, but what we do is that we take the same route Europeans took. We look at the Native Americans along the East Coast when we start teaching children about Native Americans. We don't teach them about what was going on down here. We teach them Native Americans the East Coast, basically where the 13 colonies were. The reality of it is that to understand a Native American nation, you've got to look at the Mississippi River. Because the Mississippi River to Native Americans was what Happy was to the Africans. You go to a place known as Cahokia, which, when you look at the Mississippi River, it almost becomes like a Y and then it comes down. Cahokia is located in southern Illinois. It is the largest pyramid in the northern hemisphere. There are over 110 pyramids along the Mississippi River. For more information on that, there's a book called, by Jack Weatherford, called Native Roots, Chapter 2. It's called Pyramids Along the Mississippi. There is evidence of Ramses III on the Mississippi River. There's a book called Ramses III, Father of America. Get that book and you'll see. Ramses, 1,500 years before the Christian era. Evidence. There is evidence of Africans in Davenport, Illinois. Evidence of Africans in California. Evidence of Africans in New York State. Thousands of years before the European even came to this area. See, we get the impression, because of what they have introduced, that everything started happening in 1492. There was lively and real trade amongst Africans and Native Americans thousands of years before the European even left the caves 2,000 years BC. There is evidence in Cahokia, Illinois, of trade going on with Native Americans of Brazil. There is evidence in Cahokia of artifacts of Native Americans from Canada. There is evidence of an attempted unification of the Native American world amongst the Siouan world, the Muskegon world, and what is known as the Haudenosaunee or the Iroquoian. There is evidence of the three languages coming together, and Cahokia almost was like Washington, D.C. for Native Americans. That was the center point, and you find it right in the middle. You find evidence of all three languages spoken throughout the American hemisphere of Native American peoples in Cahokia, almost like it's a repository of information. This pyramid I'm talking about is called Monk's Mound. Why? Because Monk's Mound is called because when the Trappist monks came to this area, they sat on the pyramid and took it over. And they started dismantling the stones and all the other things that built the pyramid to build their cities. So now when you go to these areas here, you see what are called mounds. But what you don't know is these mounds were once pyramids prior to Europeans dismantling the stones and the bricks and the mortar to build their homes that you see today. Now this is real live history, and I would challenge anybody to refute it. Anybody. Because this is either here or it's not. It's either real or it's unreal. And if I am wrong, please correct me, because I want the right way. I don't want my way. I want the right way. But just as we study African people through what they experience, we think the only thing happening in this time is what's happening in Egypt. But there's in Cuba, if you read the book by Dr. Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization, he has a piece on Cuba. Central Africa, flourishing civilizations. In Africa, there are civilizations built on top of civilizations. The pyramids are much older than what they say. Not to mention the Sphinx. And when our children start getting into this wisdom and start bringing out their creative genius, and once the ancestors start tapping into their collective unconscious, they're going to be able to see things that we can't see. Just like we're seeing things that those that came before us did not see. Not because anybody's better than the other, it's that every generation makes it better for the next. And so this work that we're doing now is as a roadmap. There is a curriculum here. A science curriculum, a math curriculum, language, arts, everything that our children are studying in school today can be brought in and can be done because, first of all, let me step back and tell you, there is no such thing as an African-centered curriculum. Now let me explain to you what I mean by that. When African scholars sat down and wrote all of their treatises on science and math, they did not write it and say this is for African people. When they wrote it for any cosmic mind that was in balance and ready to receive information. When the European came upon this information, they had to put their name on things, and they only put their name on things they understood. Theodosius in the 4th century, Justinian in 529, closed all of the temples of the Greek and African educational centers and burned the books. Not to mention, as we come up into 1492, Bishop Lander will do in America to Native American what Cardinal Cisneros did to the Moorish books in Spain. They destroyed the books. Now, when the emperors destroyed the knowledge of the Kemites and what the Greeks got out of the Kemites in 429 and in 529, they plunged Europe into what they call the Dark Ages. The Moors then brought this knowledge back in, having translated the work of the Egyptians, having translated, the Moors translated the works of the Greeks, not knowing they were translating the works of their own ancestors that the Greeks had misunderstood. Africans such as Ibn Rushd, who is known as Averroes, or Ibn Sina, who is known as Ibn Sin, or Avicenna, they read the works of the Greeks, and there is a piece, it's called Egyptian Sacred Science and Al-Islam. It's one of the books that I recommended on the list that you have that spoke about my coming here, where he takes every one of these writers and authors and thinkers and talks about how they felt about the Greeks. They literally turned inside out. Ibn Sina literally turned inside out the Greek thought to bring it back to the Kemetic level. In other words, what the Greeks got wrong, the Moors corrected to make right again. They studied the work of the Sumerians and the Akkadians, all of the ancient work the Moors sent around the world for the works of the Chinese, everybody, and translated these works. And they were well aware of all of this wisdom and all of this knowledge. And they were able to bring it back. Now, what happened? Africans, remember, at this time also are sharing knowledge with Native Americans, and Native Americans are sharing their wisdom with African people, because it's a two-way street now. See, a lot of Native Americans are getting very offended also, and I can kind of understand, because sometimes we as African people get excited with this wisdom. We do to Native Americans the same thing the Europeans do. Make it seem like Native Americans are just waiting on the coast for some wisdom to come. Native Americans were very much aware of their surroundings. They were very much aware of pharmacology and agriculture. They had their own over 250 different kinds of potatoes in South America. So they were well aware. But they did not have pyramid building technology. They didn't have that. And the evidence of that is that it appeared when we see Africans coming to this part of the world. Nothing is born overnight. You can't build a pyramid overnight. It takes time to study. It takes time to master the math and the science, and then you can build things. So obviously there was a trade going on in terms of wisdom. So now the wisdom of the Moors and the wisdom of the Native American is burnt by Europeans, who, one of the bishops, Cisneros, had a bonfire, and in the middle of the public courtyard in Granada, in August of 1492, which is a couple of months before Columbus is on the sea, they burned over 800,000 Moorish transcripts on science, math, and language arts. And what I'm telling us now is this. We are now living in Europe's second dark age. Because of the burning of those books back then, it took 500 years. There are treatises that show that Moors understood that if you take the nucleus, if you split the nucleus of certain elements, and then contain those split nuclei in a contained area, and then let off the detonation, you would have a mighty event. They never said explosion. It took them 500 years for Einstein to understand that concept, and that is the atom bomb. That is what is known as fission in science. Africans understood this way back then. And this is in their Moorish writings. If you want to see this, Ivan van Sertima's piece, The Golden Age of the Moors, a book to look at, because he has a nice breakdown of different essays that talk about the Moors. This is the kind of information that we need to understand in order to move forward with our young people. So the Garamantes are the early peoples that would later become the Moors. There is also a Kemetic and Dogon connection. It's important to know that the people of North Africa were the neighbors of the Kemites, and that during their occupation of Spain, the Moors from Mauritania displayed with considerable credit the grandeur of the collective African civilization and culture. But along the scene comes these Europeans. Remember, it was the Visigoths, these Germanic peoples coming up out of this area here, blonde hair, blue-eyed people, coming down out of this area here, that begin to conquer everything they come upon. In fact, they were the ones that destroyed the Roman Empire. And even the Romans called them barbarians. And if the Romans called them barbarians, well, you know the evidence of the word, because we got a word now called vandal. And you know what a vandal is, and that's what they were. They were vandals. That's where the word comes from. They come down and they destroy, and they come down into other parts. The Ostrogoths go east, the Visigoths go west. So as they come down, the Ostrogoths come this way, the Visigoths come this way, and they end up in the 400s and the 500s, somewhere here in Spain. And they're ruling Spain for a good 200 years. Before in 710, a brother by the name of Tarif, who is one of the administrators, the leaders, the lieutenants, a very important military leader of Tariq's army of Morocco, he goes in 710, July 710. Tarif, an officer in General Tariq's army, goes on a reconnaissance mission. Because now here's something else. Now it's going to come right up into this present time right now. Count Julian and Roderick, okay? Roderick is the Visigothic king that is ruling Spain. And Count Julian is a prince. He's someone of value. He's someone who has a daughter, who sends his daughter into the court of Roderick to be trained to become a lady. It is said, this is the way the story goes, that Roderick violated Count Julian's daughter. He raped her. And Count Julian got very upset. And this is what started it. Because he whistled over to the Africans here. He said, look, I got something for you now. He called them forward. And that's when Tarif went up to do a reconnaissance. He spoke to Julian to see what he was coming from, to see, why are you giving up all this land here? It all came, the story comes down that it was because of his daughter. Tarif, and by the way, that's where we get the word, the name Tarif, when you have to pay a tariff, was because where Tarif landed, Europeans had to pay a tariff from that point on in order to make that movement into that part of the land. So the word tariff comes out of Tarif. Okay, the next year, there's a brother by the name of Tariq ibn Ziyad ibn Ab Allah ibn Walgu. Now you know that's an African right there by how many names he's got. And now you know where the Hispanics get it from. You know when they had this joke about, my name is Jose Moreno, going to Gonzalez Alvarez. Well, that's where they got it from. Because before that, they were just so-and-so of this, so-and-so of this. But see, when you get this concept of naming yourself after different elements, then you come forward with these concepts. In 711, Tariq with Berbers, who are Africans, by the way, don't let them tell you that Berbers are light complexioned people. That's where they get the word from, barbers, barbarians. Romans call Africans barbarians. And that word, that's why it's called the Barbary Coast in that area, because they said along this coast there are barbarians, Berbers. These are African people here. This is even before there were light complexioned people here. Tariq goes over and he disembarks near a rocky place. He has 7,000 men, 6,700 are Africans, and 300 are Arab translators. He makes his way into the land. There's a rocky place that was at that time called Gebel Tariq, which today we call Gibraltar. Gibral is the contaminated form of Gebel, and Tariq, which is the name of the general. Gebel Tariq became Gibraltar. In August of 711, he won a decisive victory over the Visigothic army. And by the way, if your name is Medina, that's a Moorish name. Your name is Alvarez, anything with Al in it, Alfred, Albert, that's all Moorish. That's all African. Your name is Morris, Maurice, Morristown, anything like that, Gouverneur Morris, all that's African. All of that is African. Whenever you see the word Moor, you're dealing with an African. Lissim Moor, Kalim Moor, whatever Moor is African. In August of 711, he won a decisive victory over the Visigothic army. It was during this conflict that Roderick, the last Visigothic king, was killed. Basically, there are three Moorish dynasties in Al-Andalus. Basically, you have from 710 to 1086, you have what is known as the Umayyad, that was interrupted by Abbasid. You know those are both African. Ummah. Wherever you have Ummah. Ma. Ooh. Mayab. Just look at ma. That's African. This is etymology. This is language. This is where we move away from them trying to give us these illusions and understanding the etymological movement of wisdom. Where you have the ma sound, you have the African concept of Moor. You have the Abbasid, Abba, Abu, Abba, Abat, coming out of the Ethiopic language. Abba, Baba. It comes out of the African concept. So the first dynasty, basically from 710 to 1086, approximately 376 years, the Umayyad and the Abbasid dynasty. From 1086 until 1194, you have the Almoravid, Avid. Don't have to tell you any more about that. They eventually come out of the Morabites. But basically, Al-Mor, when you see this, you know you're dealing with an African. From the year 1194 until 1492, Al-Mohade. Al-Mo. Again, Hade. Now, all of this I have on a curriculum study guide, so if you're a little bit, in terms of my writing, I know I'm just here and there. I like to write in concepts. So, approximately from 710 until 1492, you have African ruling Spain, France, parts of Italy, Sicily. See, I've often said that what happened in Bensonhurst and what happened in Howard Beach, that was black on black crime. They don't really like to say things like that, but if you're Sicilian, you black. You black just like if you were Puerto Rican. You black just like if you were from the Caribbean somewhere. And when you look at them, you can see the Africanness in them. And part of what makes them feel towards us, what they feel towards us, is that innate resentment to know that they're African. But the unfortunate thing is they don't know that the very thing that makes them, if they are great is the African blood. See, everybody's trying to be Visigothic. When I come upon people who talk about how they come from Europe, I always like to play that Visigothic Vandal thing on them. What are you, a Visigoth or a Vandal? Because you've got to be one of the two if you're going to claim European blood. Because you standing here just as dark as I am, with hair very curly like mine, you better believe that you're black. Whether you have convinced yourself that you're not or not is a whole other story altogether. So we have these three dynasties in Africa that literally they are doing a number of things, and that they are developing the nation. In terms of Moorish civilization, when we look at women in Al-Andalus, what we notice in terms of women is that women have total equality. And this is something that's very difficult for some people to understand in terms of the role that women played. We find doctors, we find lawyers. They walked about the streets freely. And one of the problems that the Moorish Muslims had with the other parts of the Islamic world was the role that women played. You see, because again, these Jektonites brought back their barbarity and their off-centered feelings towards women. And that's what is in Islam today. Not in all of Islam, but those parts of Islam that will denigrate a woman clearly are in the throes of the Jektonide, the Visigothic concept of women's inferiority. So women had a very important role in terms of the society itself. The city of Cordoba. In terms of looking at Moorish civilization, we look at the city of Cordoba, and we notice that the Moorish city of Cordoba, which is often regarded as the medieval world's most cosmopolitan and sophisticated city, possessed in the 10th century, the 900s. It has 1,600 mosques, 900 public baths, 213,077 middle-class homes, 60,300 mansions, and 80,455 shops. Wealthier homes consisted of 2 floors, a library in each home, a garden, hot and cold running water, air conditioning in the summer, and heat in the winter. The population of Cordoba was estimated between 500,000 to 1 million residents. The Spanish city of Cordoba in the 10th century was very much like a modern city. Its streets were well paved. The streets were paved. The sidewalks were raised for the pedestrians, and at night you could walk for 10 miles by the light of lamps, flanked by uninterrupted extents of buildings. This is Cordoba in the 900s. Europe would not see this for another 400 years. This is just the city of Cordoba alone. Now, there is something that I wanted to do in terms of making a connection between the ostrich in Kemet, the ostrich in Dogon, and the ostrich in the Moorish civilization, because on the shield, on the emblem of the family crest, for instance, a lot of Moors had the ostrich. Now, the ostrich can only be found in Africa. Now, of course, you can find a Great Adventure, but that's today. See, and when children see ostrich in Great Adventure, they think that it could be indigenous to America. See, children don't know the difference. Children don't know the only place you can find an ostrich is like the lion. You can only find a lion in Africa. You will only find an ostrich in Africa. That's the only place that you will find ostriches. So wherever you see an emblem or a symbol of an ostrich, it has to relate back to an African concept no matter what. And these are some of the principles that we have to look at in terms of wisdom and knowledge. The ostrich feather, of course, in the Kemetic legacy was Ma'at. Ma'at representing just, truth, balance, righteousness, and all things that are just and right. The ostrich in the Dogon civilization represented a number of things. For one thing, the ostrich runs in a zigzag pattern. So does the universe. The Sirius B and Sirius A move with each other in a zigzag position. Cosmos in the elliptical form, as they travel through the universe, they travel in a zigzag position. But not just that. If you look at the crown of the Kemites, you'll notice that the white crown is shaped like an egg, which, by the way, is the ostrich egg. The Hogan of Dogon, the leader, the spiritual and the fundamental leader of the Dogon nation, the Hogan, on his headpiece is also shaped like an egg, and it's an ostrich egg. So there's a relationship in terms of the ostrich and the role that it plays in Kemet, in Dogon, or in Mali, and also in the Moors. So there's a connection here that we cannot look at. In fact, even today, it is a sacred symbol which often has totemic significance among the people in Africa, especially in the Sahel and the Cushitic areas. So you can see that there is a relationship between the ostrich and the peoples of this area here. So when you find an ostrich up here, you know it came from here. The Mozarabs. The Mozarabs are individuals who were Catholics who adopted the social customs of the Moors and Arabs. Those peoples of Spanish background that they just love the Moorish culture. So, like we got some people amongst us like this that love the European culture. You see? And they identify, they speak the language, they dress the dress, they talk the talk. Exactly. Also, I heard a brother from Haiti once say that 95% of Haiti is Roman Catholic. 100% of Haiti is Roudan. You see? So that when the lights go out, even baby Doc go to priest and priestess. You see? This is what the Mozarabs were. The Mozarabs were people who, while they kept their own Spanish flavor, they adopted the ways of the Moors. They studied the Moorish science and math. They became Moors, but at the same time they remained who they were, so they were Mozarabs. Mo, of course, don't have to tell you what that is, the Moor, and Arabs. So they were Mozarabs. And as a result, the Mozarabs, like the Jews, were entitled to their own legal system, complete with their own magistrates and own laws. Now, that's another key piece about African folk. You see, we got up in this area here. We didn't tell anybody you had to be a Muslim. We said, be what you are. Whatever you are, if you live the legacy of your spiritual faith, you will be a good person. And whatever makes you who you are, just keep on being that. You don't have to be what I am because you're not me. See, they don't have that concept. You must be them. You must act like them. You must talk like them. And anything that acts out of that is xenophobic in nature. They become fearful of you. Even if you look silly with a blonde wig and you're wearing all their clothes but your black face, they're more comfortable with that than when the sister has the dreads or when the sister or the brother has the braids. You see, that is very threatening to them. When you wear African clothes, that's very threatening to them. See, they always have to know where that outfit come from. Well, the same place your outfit came from. Where did your outfit come from? Costume sometimes. Yeah, costume, yeah. When you really look at it, you're the one in the monkey suit. So what are you talking about, Because, ties are phallic symbols. Ties are penises. And the knot are the testicles. And that's why men wear them. And that's why women look so silly when they have them on. Because they're upside down obelisks. Ties are upside down obelisks, and you notice that they all come to a point, just like an obelisk. That's where it came from. That is a remnant of their contaminated concepts of what Africans gave them. Now let's look at adoptionism, because this really is at the heart of probably what split the church in the first place, but what mandated the Moors to bring in this new concept of spirituality, because the Moor...
Blackness is the seed of heaven. It's willed in my heart, conceived in my soul to rebel oppression. It's hell a mirage created by the rival of God. A part of me's harmony, but my heart's in the street. The whole world's now scarred by the mark of the beast. Before light is dark and darkness is peace. Blackness is the seed of heaven, the essential color to be in touch with, fall in love with. Dear people of the globe, I hope that you in good health by the time my voice hit you. I'm hoping all is well with you. My mission is to build with you, touch upon some real issues. Senators, government officials, sit at the conference and listen. Have a Coke or mineral water and say I'm reminiscent of George L. Jackson, Malcolm X's last win when I'm rapping. Americans, Africans, Asians, Russians, and Arab men. Send your clergymen to journey with Nostradamus through the projects. I promise an unforgettable experience. Compare me with Imhotep, get in more depth. History was stolen, get in my zone. What makes the powers that be less gangster than Al Capone? The Rosetta Stone was stolen like Chicago was. Think I'm a thug? Let's talk about some conquerors. Napoleon, Sun Tzu, Genghis Khan, Hitler, Edie Amin, I'm Attila the Hun. Let's bring it back to the cat that invented the gun. From the Indians all the way to the Pentagon. I'm sitting on Capitol Hill. I'm composing this rhyme, guaranteed to make all of y'all feel the beauty that was trapped under siege. Believe in yourself, you'll be free. Take it from me. Blackness is the seed of heaven. It's willed in my heart, conceived in my soul to rebel oppression. It's hell of a mirage.